As the world this month marked the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombings over Hiroshima and Nagasaki that ended World War II, the remote airfield from which those bombs departed 8 decades ago this month is being revived as part of a massive shift in US defensive posture. On a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 4 8,000-foot-long runways have emerged from beneath decades of jungle overgrowth. In 1945, those fateful flights changed the course of the war and history. But in 2025, Tinian's North Field is being prepared with a very different opponent in mind, and to deter the outbreak of a war whose potential devastation must be avoided at all costs. Why does Tinian again find itself at the heart of US military strategy? What's it got to do with Taiwan? And will the warnings of the late Governor Arnold Palacios be heeded? Joining us today are Raymond Song, Prospect Foundation Vice President, Julian Ye, Indo-Pacific Open News founding editor and Radio Taiwan International host of Taiwan versus the World. And joining us from Christchurch in New Zealand is Alex Tan, University of Canterbury, New Zealand, Professor of Political Science and International Relations, National Zhengzhi University Chair Professor of Political Science and Institute for Indo-Pacific Affairs founder and Principal Research Fellow. Raymond, Julien, welcome back to the show, and also to Alex online. So first, let's take a look at where Tinian is located in the Pacific Ocean, around 180 kilometers north of Guam, also a US territory. Tinian is part of the Northern Mariana Islands and lies along the second island chain, a Cold War-era US defensive line designed to contain the USSR and China. Along that line is also Palau. Now, to understand the Northern Marianas' strategic importance, we need to go back to the Battle of Saipan in 1944. The capture of Saipan was a major turning point in the Pacific War that punctured a hole in Japan's defensive capabilities and brought the Japanese mainland within reach of American B-29 bombers. Saipan was a major Japanese base and a vital location for controlling the Central Pacific. As a result, the Japanese put up fierce resistance, making the Battle of Saipan one of the war's bloodiest conflicts. A minimum of 40,000 military and civilian lives were estimated to have been lost, including 4,000 Japanese suicides. This loss ultimately contributed to the resignation of Japanese Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. So, Raymond, let me come to you first. Why is Tinian's location still strategic after 80 years?
It's a rare occurrence with the land within the Pacific, especially as you mentioned that Okinawa and the Japanese mainland, less than 3,000 kilometers, and that's enough for a large-scale bomber to travel to target and back. So that's making the striking distance possible for strikers and bombers.
Right. And Julian, today's situation, the enemy is not Japan, it is China. How does that change, or does it change, Tinian's strategic location?
As a matter of fact, it doesn't change so much. It is exactly the same configuration. I would say that beyond the obvious geostrategic element, like Raymond mentioned, today also it plays an important role in terms of posturing, in terms of psychological war even, because the fact that the US are militarizing an island or China would militarize an island doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to fight, that they are going to use it. But they have to show it. Just look right now in the screen, you have very beautiful images of a military base, and this is very important to spread around the world to show everybody, hey, look, we are here, we are strong, we hold this place.
And so it's that deterrent signaling that you're talking about.
It's even more than deterrent. So there's some sort of psychological warfare. That's how so you influence populations by either scaring them, hey, look, I'm the enemy and I'm strong, or reassuring them, hey, look, I'm your ally and I am strong.
Alex, what we're showing now on screen is a map of China's missile ranges from the DF-26, so-called Guam killer, that's the red line that you can see there, to the new supersonic DF-27 missile, which can hit Hawaii, to the DF-41, which, as you can see there, covers the entire continental United States. So the US's ACE, or Agile Combat Employment Strategy, it essentially disperses American forces across a region. Alex, why would you say that the US believes this is the answer to combating China?
There are a couple of reasons for this, why the United States are kind of like adopting the agile combat employment strategy. 2 points I want to make here. Number one, because of China's threat profile, the fact that what you just saw on the screen in the video, the PLA has invested heavily in long-range precision missiles, air defenses, surveillance systems. So they're able to strike U.S. bases and cripple operations quite early. So this, anti-access area denial strategy has to be countered. Then the other point is because traditional United States posture now with large bases, centralized bases, can become more vulnerable. So, the adoption of the ACE strategy essentially tries to counter, Chinese threat profile and the vulnerability of large bases. So, in order to counter that, then ACE strategy counters this by doing dispersal and mobility, operational resilience, and then flexibility and speed. So in dispersal and mobility, they're spreading it out a little bit, mobile locations, many smaller locations. In operational resilience, the idea is self-sufficiency and rapid deployability.
Thanks, Alex. And Raymond, do you see any echoes in the World War II island hopping strategy that was adopted also by the Americans?
I think the situation is different from the island hopping is that the Americans launching the attacks to counter the Japanese Empire's forces in the Pacific War. But nowadays, it actually is considered to preserve its capabilities because of the long-range threat attack capability from China. So the Alex just mentioned the agile ACE, agile combat employment, which the main consideration is to try to conceal and try to preserve and try to make the calculation of the Chinese adversaries more complicated. By dispersing these forces and the launching pad for the air and maritime capabilities.
And Julian, obviously China can read history. It also understands the strategic significance and the geography of these Pacific islands, especially Northern Marianas. What military infrastructure is it building in this region?
Well, we know that China has been building small amphibious bases, sometimes even just on reefs. But another important thing to consider that is different from World War II. World War II with island hopping, they were really conquering. The United States were reconquering the Japanese territory. In this case, nobody is conquering anything. But there's also the problem of supply lines. The moment China starts having a foothold in all of these islands, all across the Pacific Ocean, it has the opportunity to cut supply lines and to disconnect the United States from its allies, maybe Taiwan or the Philippines or Australia. I know when the Solomon Islands became friendly with China, it was a big concern in Australia. I was working there at the time. It was a big concern that if the Solomon Islands went on the side of China, they could effectively cut off Australia from the United States.
And so there was supposedly a secret base that had been reported by one of the newspapers, part of a deal that was signed, a security deal between Solomon Islands and China.
We haven't seen any secret base, but it is true that it was discussed indeed, and the accession of Manasseh Sogavare as a leader in the Solomon Islands was viewed with great alarm in Canberra, but also within the Solomon Islands itself, where his alignment with China was badly perceived by enormous parts of the population, in particular in Malaita Island, and in part also because lots of people in the Solomon Islands did not want their country to be militarized by China, did not want one of their islands to become a base.
And yet, while the PLA is the main opponent for the US military, could the PRC already effectively control the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, or CNMI? What you can see here is the August 2nd funeral of Arnold Palacios, who up until July 23rd, the day he died, was a US governor of CNMI. He was the American governor because Tinian and Saipan and the rest of the CNMI are US territory, as people voting to become Americans in 1976 after being part of the UN's Pacific Islands Trust Territory administered by the US after World War II. Now, Palacios died unexpectedly at the age of 69, collapsing in his office and later dying in a hospital in Guam. No official cause of death has been released publicly and no investigation has been opened. However, during the course of his 2-year governorship, he consistently warned of CCP malign influence. This is his August 2023 testimony to US Congress. He says, "Everywhere in the Pacific, we experience CCP aggression on multiple fronts. We see it in organized crime, public corruption, and political interference. There is a strategic edge in all of the CCP's activities, and it destabilizes island communities and cuts against America's influence and security in the region. The CCP moves both quickly and methodically to fill perceived voids in American assistance and to capitalize on the social and economic vulnerabilities of Pacific Island communities. The CCP fully recognizes the strategic importance of America's territories and allies in Micronesia." Now, perhaps it's no surprise that Palacios found his fight against the CCP isolating. This is how he described it in 2024. Watch.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just a John the Baptist out in the desert. Seriously, that's how lonely it has been for the past 9 to 10 months.
Raymond, so we've heard of the Chinese influence in places like Palau, Taiwan's diplomatic ally, but how would you characterize the Chinese influence in CNMI?
I think the late governor did a contribution to highlighting the gaps between the U.S. commitment to investment about defense and the challenging situation faced by the Northern Marianas and the Palau and those Pacific Islands about economic challenges faced by the Northern Marianas when the gambling business was blooming in that islands when they're drawing a lot of Chinese monies into the local economy. And that same pressure also faced by Palau when the Chinese tourism China tried to withdraw its tourism to exert some concessions from Palau at the price of Taiwan's representation there. So the gaps is highlighted, and the late government also did a great job in trying to draw Americans' attention to this critically important issues.
So some would argue that he didn't succeed, though, Raymond.
I think I think the America are trying to do the makeup, a catch-up, trying to not only to invest more in the Pacific Islands, and also trying to coordinate the allies' power, including Japan and Australia and Taiwan, to make that try to address these shortfalls.
Julian, the governor's death, why was that seen as controversial?
We do not know why he died, so I would not speculate about this. Besides, he was succeeded by Lieutenant Governor, I think David Apatang is his name. We have no reason to believe that Apatang would have any different policy than he had. What we can infer, though, is looking at what China has done in the other island nations. I remember the president of Palau, Sorangel Whips, also complaining about Chinese interference and pressure on him. I think he said they were going as far as pretty much harassing him on his personal cell phone. So that's the kind of method that we can expect all around the Pacific.
And Raymond, what we do know also, though, is as well as testifying before Congress, trying to sort of sound the alarm bells, as you mentioned, Governor Palacios also requested that the FBI open an investigation into public corruption into CNMI. In particular, there were federal funds from the US, and we know that there was also a lot of corruption around that casino in Saipan that you mentioned.
I think that's the reason why we don't dare to, don't want to speculate, because both domestic competition, because the late government's Palacios stance must have made him many enemies because he criticized his predecessors' handling about the federal fund and about the U.S. investment after the COVID-19 in Northern Marianas. And so maybe domestic competition, political competition, and Chinese Malay influences, both elements are around. But his point is still valid about the U.S. need to pay more attention about the Chinese investment in and influences. They're not simply about economy. They carry other strategic calculation and purposes. Those are common points for not only the Pacific, but also for other nations, including Taiwan, Australia, and Japan.
And Julian, I mean, you mentioned Palau and sort of equating the level of Chinese influence, but I just want to quote what Pacific Island expert Cleo Pascal, she calls the Northern Marianas, America's Asian front line is the farthest west U.S. territory. Palau, while it's a freely associated state, is an independent sovereign state. CNMI, however, it's actually U.S. territory. So why do you think that the U.S. is allowing this kind of infiltration? For example, Chinese can visit CNMI without a visa. They can stay for 2 weeks perfectly legally without a visa. A court has convicted a Chinese woman of selling U.S. driving licenses. Of course, we know what that, if you got hold of a U.S. driving license, you could do all manner of things. Thousands of Chinese have been caught rowing boats to Guam, which is the U.S.'s power base in the Pacific. So all of this is quite concerning. Is there an irony in the fact that the U.S. is preparing militarily, but actually they're not dealing with the political warfare and therefore the infiltration, the control that Beijing has managed to achieve already in this territory?
The political warfare in general, not only in the United States, but including in the United States, is something that is extremely pervasive and very difficult to control. There are a lot of rules like this about visiting, about investing, about acquiring land, etc., all across the United States, even in specific states in mainland America that were established a long time ago for several reasons. They may be the responsibility of the local legislature, of the state legislature, etc. And China takes advantage of everything it can, of every loophole it finds. And it is extremely difficult for the United States, considering how multi-layered their legal system is, because it's a federal state with territories, etc. It's very difficult for them to review pretty much the entire arsenal of laws that are around and find which one is going to be exploited by China until China does it. So it's entirely possible that the right for PRC citizens or maybe other citizens to go to Northern Marianas without a visa was established a long time ago for some specific reason, for trade or tourism, and it was pretty much forgotten, and then now we realize that it's still there because China is using it for malicious reasons. You see it also very regularly. You hear that one state or the other in the contiguous United States, one of the 48 states, suddenly has some Chinese infiltration here or there because they found that there was an old rule, an old forgotten rule that they could use at their advantage.
Now, Taiwan has expressed regret over its exclusion from the 2025 Pacific Islands Forum, the region's top decision-making body. The host for this year, China-allied Solomon Islands, has announced the forum collectively agreed to also exclude the PRC and the United States, along with other donor countries, from this year's event. Only the 18 Pacific Island nation members, which include Australia and New Zealand, will attend the event on September 25th in Honiara. Reports have circulated since last year that Solomon Islands, which switched diplomatic ties from Taiwan to China in 2019, would seek to exclude Taiwan from participation due to China's pressure. Alex, let me come to you. So how serious a development is this for Taiwan, and why is it important for Taiwan to maintain these relationships with the Pacific Islands?
Yeah, this is a very unfortunate development, and it is very obvious that Solomon Island got a lot of pressure from the PRC not to invite Taiwan Taiwan has always been a development partner of the Pacific Islands. So it's very, very unfortunate that Taiwan is not allowed to participate because of this outside pressure, so to speak. I remember over here in New Zealand, Foreign Minister Winston Peters actually commented.
Raymond, I mean, it was broadened to exclude all the donor partners, but this is really targeting Taiwan, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's no denying about that, because actually in the previous year, actually China made a fuss about it. And China has, of course, on the international plan, tried to do everything it can to try to exclude Taiwan or reduce Taiwan's presence. If you consider from Solomon Islands' perspective, they are doing this to please China, try to prove that it's useful or it's in Chinese investment worth something. And I think the crucial point is about the next year. There's also no denying that's a breakoff from the status quo, because under the 1992 agreement, tacit agreement, actually Taiwan is considered a part of the partners, the Taiwan partners. I think in the future rounds of the PIF, whether that's maybe the Solomon Island made a proposal to separate this, to regulate this kind of things to the two tiers, tier 1 for members and tier 2 to partners, and this. Then it will be crucial to see whether Taiwan is considered as a partner, or even that status will be under some pressure from China to change.
Now, in August, Japan made its first port call to New Zealand's capital in Wellington since 2007. The JS Isa and destroyer JS Suzanami arrived from Sydney, where they took part in this month's multinational Talisman Sabre involving New Zealand, Australia and other countries. Japanese warships last visited a New Zealand port in 2016. Julien, so this was largely symbolic, but why was it important for Japan?
To be honest, we have seen Japan getting more and more involved in military affairs because of rising pressure from China. We have seen that. What I found even more interesting is the fact that they've been to New Zealand, of all places, because when I was stationed in Australia, I saw that Australia was subjected to a monstrous amount of Chinese influence, absolutely colossal. And this changed after Malcolm Turnbull became Prime Minister and realized the extent of it. So Australia has been now moving in a different direction when it comes to China for a long time, and it's a bipartisan position. But New Zealand remains under a very, very, very strong Chinese influence, extremely strong Chinese influence for a democracy. So I find it especially interesting that New Zealand is welcoming Japanese warships.
And Alex, obviously you are in New Zealand. Why was this visit made now? You know, we talked about the 18 years since the last visit to Wellington for a Japanese warship.
Yeah, well, in response to Julian's comment about how strong the influence of China here, it has to be noted, though, that this current government, actually the prior government, has already started our defense capability review, and our defense and security strategy statements have already been released. These new defense positions have actually aligned more with how we see the increasing instability in our region, because as United States and Chinese strategic competition comes to us, we do feel that this is it makes the Pacific really quite unstable. So at this point in time, there is now much more collaboration actually between New Zealand and Japan, New Zealand and South Korea. Part of the reason is also because since 2017, with the American posture changing, and certainly now it gives agency to middle powers to actually do more, and Japan is certainly doing its part, and New Zealand has certainly realized that it's our time to do our part. So our own defense capability plan is calls for increase in our investment in defense, and since the new government, since this particular government, the national coalition government has started, there has been a regular 2+2 meeting between the foreign ministers and defense ministers of Australia and New Zealand. And you have to note, though, that Australia is actually our only treaty ally. We are security partners with the United States, but we're a treaty ally with Australia. So we have to coordinate a little bit with our only ally, and that's one reason why all these exercises are now happening. As the United States, in a way, moves a step back a little bit to allow more space for Australia, Japan, South Korea, the middle powers to do more and pick up the slack, so to speak.
So one very final question, Alex. So rather than Japan joining ANZUS to make JANZUS, do you think it's time for there to be a JANZ? Japan, Australia, New Zealand?
I think there is a realization that we need our partners in the other countries like South Korea and Japan to certainly patrol such a large EEZ that we have. New Zealand has probably the third or fourth largest EEZ, but we're overwhelmed. Certainly our own naval capability is quite limited. So having allies and like-minded countries coordinate these things with us are good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Alex in New Zealand, and Raymond and Julien here in the studio today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.